Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed participants, welcome to the 2024 World Congress of the Regional Science Association International. I extend a warm welcome to the international leaders of the RSAI and its member organizations, the leaders of the John von Neumann University, and our distinguished guests from all around the world and from Hungary. Hoping that we live up to the warm welcoming words of the President of the RSAI in the foreword of the program, the city of Kecskemét and John von Neumann University, the proud hosts of the World Congress, wish you unforgettable days at the Congress. Having already seated him, now I would like to invite Professor Hans Westlund, the President of the RSAI, to the stage to give his welcome speech.
Dear regional scientists, dear friends, welcome to the 14th World Congress of the Regional Science Association International, and the first Congress we have had on site in 6 years. You can't believe how happy I am that you are here and that everything is working so good. It is, of course, not a coincidence that everything is working so well here. The local organizing committee, co-chaired by Dr. Balázs Lengyel and Dr. József Kárpáti, together with Mr. Imre Végvári, have, besides all their regular tasks, done an incredible job with the preparations for the Congress. Moreover, the RSAI Executive Director, Dr. Andrea Kaljaro, and the Secretariat, Mrs. Elizabeth Martins, have been completely indispensable in arranging this Congress. So please, I suggest we give them all a very well-deserved hand. Many academic disciplines analyze the world, and most of them specialize more and more in order to better understand the innermost essence of things. But specialization might also lead to that you miss out the structures and how things are connected to each other. Therefore, there is a need for transdisciplinary approaches that are able to combine information, ideas, methods, and analysis from various disciplines and thereby produce something new, synthesis, that the specialized disciplines cannot achieve. One such transdisciplinary discipline is regional science. The world is changing in ways no one could foresee 10 years ago. It is, of course, important to understand the details in these changes, but it's even more important to understand how the details are interlinked. This, I would say, means a unique position for regional science. We have the tools, we have the knowledge, we have the theories to analyze the transformation that goes on right in front of our eyes. So, no matter what the calendar says, it's always springtime for regional science. We are roughly 300 registered participants from, in total, 41 countries. It is we all together who are going to make this Congress to an unforgettable experience. Outstanding keynote speakers from 4 continents, 3 policy sessions on state-of-the-art issues, lots of presentations, meetings, both planned and spontaneous, exchange of knowledge and ideas, and maybe it will even be some time for dancing and romancing. Because the Congress of the Regional Science Association International is not only a serious event for serious scholars, it's also a great party for us all. We start that part of the program a little easy with the welcome party tonight, and tomorrow there is a night on the town. And maybe you have heard the saying that one night in Kecskemét is like a year in any other place. And if you haven't heard it, you will learn it tomorrow night. And on Wednesday, there's the gala dinner. So indeed, we have come to the right place. Enjoy.
President Westlund, thank you. And now, someone without whose work and contribution we couldn't be here today, I would like to call Associate Professor Andrea Antonio Caraiu, the Executive Director of the RSAI, to the stage to share his welcome message with us.
Üdvözöljük az RSAI 14. világ kongresszusán. Welcome. Okay, as a regional scientist, despite what Professor Kovács thinks here, the president of the Hungarian section, we like numbers and we like evidence. And I collected data from the last 2 editions of the World Congress, individual submissions from different parts of the world. And this table here shows that not only regional science keeps going strong in places where traditionally we have the cradle of the discipline, so North America, where the discipline was originated, and also Europe, where we now have the vast majority of our global members, but we now have emerging positive trends from all over the world, including Africa, South America, and Oceania. So we are very happy to show that there is so much diversity in terms of disciplinary backgrounds, in terms of gender, in terms of approaches, in terms of places of origin, and we're happy to be here together to share our knowledge about mutual research outcomes. To conclude, I have a long list of thank yous, because this is a complex thing, as everybody dealing with the Congress knows by heart. The local organizing committee, which has been extraordinary throughout the organization of the Congress. So in particular, Balázs and József, our LOC chairs, and Imre Vevgari, who managed the organization of the technical things and keeps on fixing things for us all over these days. The mayor, the municipality of Kecskemét, because they provided invaluable support to all activities that we are going to benefit from over the next few days. Various international organizations, the ones that are closest to us in terms of disciplinary interests, so the OECD, DG Regio, the JRC of the European Union, all of them provided support both financially and also organizationally and scientifically. German institutions, our close friends from the 4 supranational organizations of the RSAI, all supranational sections, and of course, national sections, including the one which was closest to this Congress, which is the Hungarian section. The RSAI Council and the Long Range Planning Committee, which comprises previous presidents of the RSAI because they supported the organization and the management of the whole procedure. Professor Hans Westlund, who chairs the RSAI right now, and above all, Ms. Elizabeth Martins, who's providing us with the solution to all problems. Thank you very much and enjoy the Congress. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you. And next, please welcome Professor Roberta Capello, the President of the European Regional Science Association to the stage.
Okay, dear colleagues and dear friends, on behalf of the European Regional Science Association, I really welcome you to the 14th Regional Science Association World Conference. Let me say that for ERSA, it is really a pleasure to host the World Conference in Europe again. Why that? Because it took, last time we had a World Conference in Europe was 2012 in Timisoara, when I was president of the RSAI, and I really wanted to support the development of the regional science sections in the eastern part of Europe. I'm pleased to see that after 12 years, these sections are growing very, very well, are very active. A lot of young students and young scholars growing up, which makes the future of ERSA be something that we are sure it will happen, so a certainty. I took up the presidency last January, from the 1st of January this year. So it's just a few months that I'm running this big association. ERSA is a very big association, as you know, made of different associations all over Europe, and this sometimes is the richness of our countries. And moreover, we belong to RSAI. I would like also to bring back, in my years of presidency, a close connection with RSAI, because I really do think that the cooperation among our supranationals and with the Regional Science Association International is something that provides a lot of value added. And one of the examples of this value added is that I managed, together with the European Organizing Committee, the European Council, the ERSA Council, to start working hard immediately, and thanks to the help of RSAI, we managed to start launching a new journal. So I am pleased to announce that over the next few days, it's really a matter of days, ERSA will sign with one of the most important international publishers, which is Elsevier. We will launch our own journal. We thought how and which kind of journals would have been of interest. Not another papers in regional science, because we have it. I've been for 9 years the editor-in-chief of Papers in Regional Science, so I know it. We know that we have Regional Science Policy and Practice, another great journal. So we had to think about a new niche that we had to cover. And just now, Hans Westerlund mentioned that we live in a period of turbulence. And it's true. Since 2008, we go from one shock to another. The financial and economic crisis in 2008 that lasted with waves in different countries more than in others, the economic and financial crisis. And then we moved to pandemia, something that we would have never thought of going through. And then, okay, we managed to go out of that, and now the new geopolitical conflicts. Even the war in Europe would have never, none of us would have expected that. So we thought, and Elsevier was extremely interested in that, to launch the journal on global challenges, because these are global challenges. So this is something that doesn't happen in Europe only, it happens everywhere in the world at the same time. So we are all threatened by the same challenges. So global challenges and regional science. So the idea is to have a journal dealing with all these shocks that should have been, let's say, something rare, which is instead they take place every 2 years, we have a new one. And the way in which our territories all over the world react and can react and probably also proact to these types of shocks. So the title of the journal is Global Challenges and Regional Science. So over the next few days, we are going to sign the contract, and in 1 month, we will have the platform ready for the submissions. So just start thinking about a very nice journal, a nice paper that you are ready to submit it. Just another few words. The paper, the journal will be an open access journal, but for the first 2 years, APCs will be totally weighed by Elsevier, which means that you will have your paper on open access, but without paying any euro or whatever you want, dollars, whatever currency you want to think of. So it will be free of charge for the first 2 years. And then, moving on, we will have the clear discount that is imposed by the contract for RSAI members. So this has been possible, made possible in 4 months of presidency, only because RSAI signed a contract with Elsevier for the other 2 journals that we already have and opened the way to their supranationals. So I would really like to thank RSAI on behalf of ERSA to give ERSA this extremely important opportunity. We will have, this is a second journal for ERSA. We know that we have region, but this will have, let's say, this will be, let's say, with the publisher, the international publishers, and I'm sure that with the capacities that ERSA has, with the knowledge that ERSA has, in a few years, we will have another important journals like the ones we have with RSAI. So this is an example of how our community and our associations can, let's say, bring together their strength and give all our members all over the world, this is an important element. We don't have a journal which is a European one. This is something that Elsevier and also ERSA would have not liked. We have a journal which is a worldwide journal. For this reason, we created an editorial team made of distinguished scholars from our community, RSAI community. So we have Vicente Ruela, who will be the editor-in-chief of the journal, and I thank him for taking this challenge. Then we will have, let me see, I wanted to put them in alphabetic order, but I'm not sure I remember that. Andrea Caraglio from Politecnico di Milan, because I think he's connected, he knows everybody in our association, being the executive director of RSAI since 6 years. Then we have Balázs Lengyel from the University of Hungary. We have Sarah Lowe from the University of Illinois, US, who is also our great speaker next, and also Balázs in the next section. And last but not least, we have Rachel Ortigue Argila from the University of Manchester. So I think that these guys will be able to launch the journal and to run it. And of course, we really need all of you and to be ready to submit papers in order for our journal to become a success, but I am sure that we will manage. So at the end of this story, I hope you enjoyed this 3 days program, which is rather interesting, and I look forward to meeting you whenever here around if you need some other information, and especially to see you all in Terceira end of August. Thank you very much.
Professor Capello, thank you. Closing in even further locally, please welcome to the stage the President of the Hungarian Regional Science Association, Professor Ilona Pálné-Kovács.
Dear colleagues, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me opportunity to welcome you on behalf of the Hungarian Regional Science Association. The civil, independent scientific organization was established more than 20 years ago as a final stage of the institutionalization of regional science in Hungary. In the 90s, after the systemic change, as we were approaching EU membership and preparing for EU cohesion policy, the terms of region and regionalism were more popular than nowadays. Scholars dealing with regional issues enjoyed a great prestige. The government involved us in the preparation of the law on regional development and the national, local, and regional plans. We were enthusiastic, with high hopes in our ability to adapt to the preconditions of decentralized, transparent, and efficient system of regional development, and thus the efficient absorption of EU subsidies. This policy context motivated us for expanding, creating new institutions, university programs, and pushed us closer to the sphere of practice. We have conducted a great deal of applied research. Our other priority was creating stronger connections to the regionalist community of Europe. Hungarian scholars and institutions were often invited to research consortia focused on the policy and institutional aspects of regional processes and development. These very challenges prompted us to be open, to seek opportunities for working together with various disciplines rather than narrowing our profile to true regional science. 20 years later, the context of our activity or role has been completely transformed. There is no time here to explain why the strong centralization and the new social, economic policies and political values have contributed to the disappearance of the spirit of regionalism. But it is a fact that the popularity of regional science has declined. We can witness the decreasing number of graduate and postgraduate students, the renaming or elimination of university departments formerly dedicated to regional science. The main independent scientific research unit, my workplace, the Institute for Regional Studies, has been merged by other research institutes and is suffering from the loss of the former capacities and financial background. I hope that this crisis will not last forever. Some elements of the system have fortunately survived. The Hungarian Regional Science Association has seen an expansion in its membership and the number of events. We have around 300 members, and we organize our conferences regularly with hundreds of presentations. We are present in many regions, forming a network of territorial subunits, scientific communities in Hungary and neighboring countries, irrespective of their institutional background. I hope that this conference will also strengthen our position and visibility, as we can see by the large number of scholars who accepted our invitation, boost new personal networks, and launch of new projects. Indeed, this springtime may be symbolic for regional science as well, as formulated Professor Westlund in his introduction. I am convinced that our knowledge and values are important. There is a lot of work to do to understand what's happening in Hungary and in many other countries where regional polarization has been strengthening. Indeed, a new spring, new waves, and new regional trajectories are needed. Let us start with our work, and I wish you all a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, and now please welcome the Rector of the John von Neumann University, Professor Tamás Fülöp.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, dear President, Executive Director, dear professors and colleagues. I warmly welcome the participants of the 14th World Congress of the Regional Science Association International at the John von Neumann University in Kecskemét. I greet the leadership of the RSAI and partner organization also with great respect. And I also greet our professors, keynote speakers, lecturers, section leaders, and all our guests. So, a great experience welcomes you together on behalf of the university, and we are honored that you came and you are here with us. In Hungary, we have a saying, anyone who wants to shape, create, and transform the future must grasp and understand the past and the present at the same time. This is not such an easy task, of course. Our ancient traditions and contemporary possibilities encourage us to always create better and more excellent things and create eternally lasting values. Our academic mission is also the excellence, which we also strive to implement in everyday practice in our university. Almost a year of preparation and work preceded this elevated moment of the opening ceremony. But this is nothing more than a symbol for us. Since last year, we celebrated the 120th anniversary of the birth of our university's namesake, the world-famous Hungarian mathematician John von Neumann. His life and his work also inspired us last year when we applied for this World Congress. We Hungarians have learned over the past centuries that world-class results can only be achieved with hard work, cooperation, diligence, commitment, perseverance, and faith. This requires goals and visions that our university and dynamically growing applied science university also possesses. The result of our Nobel Prize-winning scientists and globally recognized Hungarian researchers encourage us to follow this path to increase science and the commonwealth of knowledge, of course, with great responsibility. This event also offers us the opportunity to do so. And we have something more to be proud of in the field of regional sciences as well. We wanted to express this by naming the meeting rooms of the conferences. And I'm convinced that we could not have found a more current topic than sustainability and regionality for this year's Congress. After all, one of the humanity's biggest challenges is sustainability, which can only be pushed forward by cooperation, especially by the cooperation of countries, regions, and nations. I'm sure that this is also why we were able to identify with the objectives and main messages of the 14th World Congress of RSAI from the very first moment, because we also believe that regions growing together. And I'm also convinced that the organizing committee and my colleagues did everything to make this a successful and memorable World Congress in the beautiful, inspiring, and innovative campus of the university. And all the conditions are given by the university and the city of Kecskemét so that we can offer you experiences in science, culture, art, and gastronomy during the next 4 days. Have fun, feel at home in Hungary and Kecskemét. Let the good news of Kecskemét and the John von Neumann University be spread around the world. Thank you for your trust in the management of RSAI. Thank you for your participation, and thank you for your cooperation to my colleagues and, of course, our very, very talented students. I wish you an excellent meeting and conference in the next 4 days. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for these words. Getting really local now, a message from the heads of the local organizing committee. First, Professor Balázs Forman, and then Dean József Kárpáti. Please, Professor Forman, come to the stage.
Welcome. Okay. Thank you very much for your accept our invitation. I would like to speak. Thank you. You are here. Welcome, welcome, bienvenue, bienvenuta, bienvenido, the other language. We celebrate the John von Neumann 100. We celebrate John von Neumann 100. Why? Our rector said the last year we celebrate the birthday of John von Neumann 120 years. In present years, 121 years. Because of John von Neumann, birth 1903. But if we use the 11 number system, the 121 is equal 100 in 11 number system. And we celebrate it. Thank you very much. Enjoy every minute of the conference. Enjoy every minute to stay in Kecskemét. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Forman. Please, Dean Kárpáti, the stage is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be on this stage and to look at you. Actually, it's a great proudness for me that I could stand on this floor now and see how many people have visited our nice, young, but really innovative university. Times are changing, and I think that this university is a living example to illustrate these changes. Being a local, born here and raised here and living here in Kecskemét, it's very interesting for me to see that this plot used to be the old hospital. And 3 children of me, 2 of my 3 children were actually born at this location somewhere. I could not identify exactly where, but now, after closing and demolishing the old hospital, we have this beautiful campus here. And I think that really demonstrates that if there is a will and if there is a good idea somewhere, then this could be made real. And I can clearly recall the moment 1.5 years ago when my co-chair colleague Balázs Forman has reached out to me with his idea that here is the RSAI World Congress. We need to apply to organize this program here in Kecskemét because it will be a huge leap for us in order to enhance the visibility of this university and in order to create a new network of contacts, professional contacts within the researcher community. well, in brackets, being the head of the Southern Plain branch of the Hungarian Regional Science Association, I immediately agreed with this idea, but this could not have been made real without the foundation behind the university, which has sponsored this event from the very first idea, and without all the colleagues who have really cooperated during the application procedure and who really put all the efforts in the preparations. We will have a beautiful week, and just let me highlight a couple of things for you before we start proceeding to the professional part of this opening ceremony. First of all, let me highlight the reception with our dinner tonight. So at 6 o'clock there is a dinner, there is a reception, there are some surprise program elements, so please feel free and be committed to be here on this wonderful event. Then for tomorrow and for Wednesday, we have organized 2 visits, one of them in the animation studio and one of them in a local Palinka distillery, so you can actually taste and look at spirits, how spirits are distilled. I hope that you have applied for these programs, but if not, please look after one of our staff and maybe there will be some more space to fit in. But going to more professional program elements, let me also highlight that there will be a special session tomorrow at 6 p.m. organized by EPSO, the European Personal Selection Office, which will give a briefing about the opportunities working at the European institutions. I really recommend to you to participate at this event at 6 o'clock here at the ground floor auditorium in the smaller room. And last but not least, Hans already mentioned that tomorrow evening you will have an opportunity to go out to the city and enjoy the night. I recommend you to choose the tickets to the Cultural Center, which will feature a fantastic folk dance ensemble production. That's one of my secret hints for tomorrow evening. And the other is that at 11 o'clock, we have organized a bus coming back to this direction for those who are staying at Hotels Aqua, Hotel Sheraton, and Hotel Granada. So actually you can take your time and you will have a direct bus leaving from the center with the RSAI logo, and it will leave at 11 o'clock. So you will have plenty of time to enjoy this almost summer-like evening in Kecskemét. So all in all, enjoy the next couple of days and enjoy all the professional fun and professionalism which is up to come on these stages. Have a great time. Thank you for visiting Kecskemét.
Thank you, Dean Karpati. These were the welcome speeches, and now for our first keynote, please welcome Professor Sarah Alo.
Welcome. You guys hear me okay? Great. A little bit about myself to get started. My name is Sarah Lowe. I'm the department head, you might call it a chair, of the Agricultural and Consumer Economics Department at University of Illinois. We have 40 faculty. We also work very closely with geography, urban planning, and economics at University of Illinois. I did my PhD at University of Illinois, went and worked in Washington, D.C. in policy for a long time. Then went to University of Missouri, which, like University of Illinois, is a land-grant university. And this is a system that was set up in the US a long time ago, 150 years ago, explicitly to have academics engage and collaborate with people and create practical solutions to problems that industry and families are facing. So, a little bit about me and why I'm talking today. Now you know where engagement and collaboration come from. I thought that that was something I could bring to the table, to this conversation. Climate change. Roberta did a fantastic job talking about some of these global challenges we're facing, these shocks, and climate change certainly is one of those shocks. We've heard about sustainability and the importance of sustainability. Why am I talking about rural resiliency, okay? You can't tell by my American accent, but this is actually my Scottish accent. I grew up in southwest Scotland. My father was a fisherman. I grew up in the 80s when the economy was very bad. There was a knackery, meat processing plant that closed in my community. That was one of the only jobs for most of the families. So from about 8 years old, I knew I wanted to work to help rural people, and I wanted to help rural people through their economy. So that dream took me to the United States, to a land-grant university, to Iowa State University, then to Purdue University. At Purdue, I walked in my first day. I told my new advisor what I wanted to do, and he said, we'll send you to the regional science meetings. I said, what is regional science? He said, it's hard to describe, but you will like it. He was so correct. So that was 23 years ago, and here I am today. So that's a little bit about me. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm honored to be a keynote speaker with a lovely company this week. I'd like to give a few acknowledgments. Thanks to my research assistant, Ziad, for help with this presentation. Thanks to some of my colleagues at University of Illinois and elsewhere. And a bit of a caveat, I'm not an international expert. I come here to learn more on this topic about what you're doing in your country. But I present kind of a US perspective, and moreover, a perspective from the central, the agrarian part of the United States, which I think is not that different than Kecskemét. And a little picture of me last time I was in Hungary for the RSAI summer school when I was a grad student in Page. It was very good. Oh, you want to see that again? Roberta wanted to see. This is me when I was younger. Okay, let me get started. The clock is ticking. So let me talk first about some of these challenges that are facing rural regions. Okay, so what I did here, or more correctly, Ziad did, is he took the names of journal articles in kind of the top 5 regional science journals, and we went back for 5 years and looked at all the journal articles that had something to do with rural, and took kind of the keywords from those titles and put them into this word cloud. So this is kind of a backwards looking over the last 5 years, what are the rural challenges in regional science? And today I'm going to focus on kind of 3 topics in rural resiliency: agriculture and food, demographics, and of course the economy. And so we see these 3 topics in the key words of our journal articles, of our field journals, okay? So here we see migration, population, depopulation, demography. There'll be a wonderful session in this auditorium right after the opening session with OECD on smart shrinkage and depopulation. And of course, some of the economy terms, broadband internet, entrepreneurship. These are some of the topics that we have been faced. So agriculture, food, demographics, the economy are all affected by climate change. Is it normal to be this warm in Kecskemét this time of year? The rector says no, it's not. So we're all familiar with some of the things that climate change has been responsible for, right? We're having temperature changes which fuel storms. In the US, we've had real trouble with wildfires, Canada more so, hurricanes. And that also causes changes in precipitation, drought, which is particularly harmful in agricultural areas, floods, which is particularly harmful to people and businesses and families. And this challenge is not going to go away. As a globe, we've been working hard to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and it's a big challenge. This challenge is not going to go away. Here's some data from the US. So the peak for US GHG emissions was around 2005. We're only just now getting closer to 1990 levels. So again, I want to give some examples, and I want you to put your thinking caps on, and I'd love to have a few of you share examples of agronomic, demographic, and economic things that have been impacted, particularly in rural regions in your country. And of course, some of these changes caused by climate change are going to be positive, but we tend to think a little bit more about the negative things. So here's a few from the US in terms of agriculture. Hurricane production. So these numbers are from a regional scientist at University of Florida, and she studies the economic impact of hurricanes. One hurricane in 1 year will cause about a 60% reduction in income from crops, a 25% reduction in income from livestock. Derechos, who's heard of a derecho? Yeah, it's a Spanish word for straight line winds. So I've had the joy of living through 3 derechos now. So it's a sudden and kind of straight line wind that just blows everything over. And Iowa is in the center of the US. It's one of the top corn or maize producing states in the US. They had a derecho there in 2020 that caused a 5.5% decline in yield. You'll see from the picture in the middle, the wind just quite literally blew the corn over, blew the plants over. And the picture on the top, these are storage containers that farmers store their corn in so that they can use advanced marketing practices and sell the corn at the most optimal time. Those storage containers got blown away. Who has another example on agriculture? Yes. Frost, yes, for fruit trees around here, the frost can be, if we have a late frost, it's very, very good, thank you. Okay, so here's another ag example, and it's related to supply chains. A lot of us are working in supply chains now. So there's a map of the US, and that huge yellow area in the US is the water basin for the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River is the 3rd largest river in the world. And the US, about 100 years ago, made a huge investment in infrastructure to send all of that corn, that maize, from places like Iowa and Illinois down the Mississippi River to export. So all the corn, all the grain, all the wheat, everything that's produced in the US to be exported comes from that yellow basin, comes down the Mississippi River. Well, the last few years, we've had such little rain that the Mississippi, the 3rd largest river in the globe, was too low to transport grain. So that created huge pricing fluctuations for farmers. They were unable to have a stable income, and also huge logistical and supply chain challenges that came all the way down to the consumer and the family, raising the price for groceries. This is a map that an American agricultural economist did, kind of showing where the geography of production is changing in the US. So productive places, we have all this infrastructure in Iowa to grow maize, but now it's becoming more productive further north of Iowa. So that's going to cause more supply chain issues, more challenging infrastructure issues. Demographic change. Okay, climate change is forcing migration. Sometimes that's a selected migration. Oftentimes it's people displaced by a storm or a flood. And as we know globally, migration often leads to conflict, food security, water security shortages, and the need for more humanitarian crises. Closer to home for me in the US, Nature Cities recently published something. Half of US cities are depopulating. Did you know that? The US still uses growth-based planning and economic development strategies. We haven't gotten on smart shrinkage like the US has. We're not smart enough for smart shrinkage, maybe. But there's these massive demographic changes, and we're seeing a lot of more migration in the US than we usually would. And rural areas are hurt by this, but rural areas have also tried to benefit by attracting some of those migrants out of the cities. So as I mentioned, in the US, we cannot grow forever. We have this growth-based policy. So particularly in rural areas that face demographic challenge in the terms of depopulation, we go to our policymakers, our practitioners, and their answers are always, well, we should grow, or we should try and grow. That's not going to be the answer forever. Okay, economic challenges. Who can think of an economic challenge related to climate change? Maybe something that's affected you in your country. Anyone? No? Shy? Yes, Andrea. Yeah. Ah. Okay, so if you guys couldn't hear Andrea, he said this is causing, the changing agricultural productivity is causing changes in investors. People are buying up farmland further north so that maybe in hopes of a wine production moving to Canada. That's a wonderful example. Of course, economists, many of us are economists in this room, have calculated kind of changes to gross domestic product. So in the US, economists are looking at around 2% decline annually attributed to climate change. And mainly they're using mortality to calculate that. So that's really just the mortality estimate. It's quite grim. Of course, we're regional scientists. That effect is going to be different across space. So some places it might be 2%, but other places it might be a 20% decline in the economy due to climate change. So that's just an example of how relevant this is to regional science. A few examples from rural areas of the United States. We have in the United States, we're in rural areas very resource extraction based still, production agriculture, but of course also mining. And so big mining towns, typical boom bust, in Montana, in West Virginia have been very affected by the shift to using natural gas to generate electricity, lower GHGs, but entire towns have lost their economic base, just like the knackery in my hometown in Scotland when that closed, okay? Of course, on the other hand, jobs are being created in alternative energies, such as wind and solar. So the Great Plains is the kind of central west part of the US. Think the Dakotas, Kansas, Nebraska. It's very windy, very sparsely populated. So they've been investing a lot in solar and wind energy. This creates other global challenges, crises. Now they're generating all this electricity, but there are no people there to use the electricity, right? So we're trying to develop the infrastructure to transport the electricity to the east, to where the cities are. But rural people don't always like change, do we? So there's been huge resistance to what we call the Grain Belt Expressway, which is this huge system to transport electricity that is generated in a green manner to the big population centers on the east coast of the US. So this is a regional science conference. Let me tie this back to regional science and how we can make and need to make, must make, important contributions to these challenges. Why do we do this? All of us have our own discipline, but we're drawn to regional science because we like applied, problem-oriented work. We want to make a difference. We're interested in how things vary across space. And this is our comparative advantage, as it were. We bring a lot to the table. These are just a few examples. Put your thinking caps on. Maybe you can give me a few more examples before I go to the next slide, okay? But we're experts in spatial spillovers. We can understand and we can bring scientifically to the table what is the impact of a derecho on places not hit by the derecho, but perhaps secondarily impacted due to supply chain or infrastructure differences, right? So we are experts in these spatial spillovers. We understand what is going on at the local level is very important. We know that how a policy is implemented in one place might be different in another place, and that we need regional policies in different places, different solutions for different places. And we know that the sum of the parts leads up to the whole. Climate change is a huge macro issue. But as regional scientists here in Kecskemét, we know that things that we do here this week can make a difference that will add up to the whole to help the globe in the long run. We're interdisciplinary. I think Hans said we're transdisciplinary. Love it. I love the affirmation that we are transdisciplinary. You'll see here, I wasn't quite sure, but now I know. Hans has said we are transdisciplinary. And we're also systems thinkers, whether we know it or not. And this is something that's coming up more and more in the US regional science literature that I find really exciting. And I'm excited about with regards to the new journal that Roberta talked about. I want to go back to the US land-grant universities. So this is a map of the US, and all the dots on that map, I know they're quite tiny, are land-grant universities. There's at least one in every state, and they were founded by the United States federal government giving land to these universities. So these were agricultural and mechanical universities. So they were universities founded on being practical, so engineering, agriculture, family sciences, much like the university we're at here today. And we're given money every year. To this day, we're given a lot of money specifically to engage with communities and help find practical solutions for communities. And so we're translating the basic science that we do into something that can make a difference for businesses, for communities across our state and across the country. So I call this engagement. This is the scientist working, producing science and taking it to the community and saying, I'm hoping I can solve a problem. Let me engage in dialogue with you. So I think that's something that really sets us as regional scientists apart. And I would love to learn, I'd love to talk with you over coffee in the breaks about what this system looks like in your country. I know a lot of other countries have something similar. So for those of you who saw me at NARSC in Montreal in 2022, this was kind of what I posited at that conference. I call it Regional Science Coming Full Circle. And let's see if I can get the pointer to work. Maybe not. Okay, that's okay, we don't need that. So we have research, we do basic research, that's at the top of the circle, and we're used to kind of translating that research, helping to work with policymakers to improve decision making and having impact on communities. And what I would like to see from regional scientists is this two-way engagement piece, the next piece of taking that impact on communities and using that to improve our research, to help us ask better research questions, to help us better anticipate the future so that before a crisis occurs, we can have the science to answer that crisis ready. So regional science has lots of fantastic ways that we can make an impact on this huge global issue, whether it's related to rural areas or not. So let me give some examples about regional scientists and engagement and collaboration. Okay, so here's a few pictures from a project, and I think this is this project is a nice example of both engagement and collaboration. So this is a project where a few of us as social scientists were approached by the engineers. In rural America, we have a huge problem, a dearth of broadband internet. Everybody needs internet these days, so this was right after the pandemic. So the engineers came to me and said, we have developed this new technology to get to allocate how packets of information can go to rural communities. We need to pilot this project. We have a small National Science Foundation grant to pilot it so we can do a bigger grant. And the engineers said, cool, but we only do computer programming. How do we pilot this technology? So they came to us as the social scientists at the land-grant university. So we're at a different university than the engineers. They're at the engineering university. And we were able to use connections, engagement that I had already set up so we could interact with a small town. We picked a town, we asked them, what would you do if you had internet? We got them excited about internet. Then we said, by the way, can we put this lumpy machinery in your house and can we gauge how much packets of information you have coming in and out? We had to have that trust, so engagement, trust, and then the collaboration came out of the participants benefited. They got free internet in their home. The social scientists benefited. We got a journal article out of it. The engineers benefited. They got the big NSF grant so they could roll this out. So just an example of engagement and collaboration. So let me talk a little bit more about engagement. To ask good research questions, we must go outdoors more. So this is a picture of Steve Deller. Who's met Steve Deller? He's former president of NARSC, okay? He's a character. And of course, two-way engagement has been around for a long time, but Steve made this two-way engagement a focus of his 2015 presidential address. Essentially, this full circle, scholars learning from the practical, and putting that into action. Many of us have heard of Harvard economist Raj Chetty. His quote there is, "I don't get my best research ideas sitting at my desk. We've got to go out and about and get outdoors." So, I think this is an important slide. Engagement inside academia, or the ivory tower. Okay, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. Everybody needs to put their hand up for one or the other. Does your university, does your boss, I'm the boss of 40 faculty, does your university value high-quality journal articles more, or a report that could maybe help OECD policymakers? All right, show of hands. Whose university high-quality journal articles? Yeah, the vast majority. Whose university would value more helping the policymaker? Oh, one brave soul. Yeah, what university are you at? What university are you at? Excellent, thank you. Good, thanks for being a brave soul. So as someone who is the boss of 40 faculty, I ask, why can't both be valuable? I think a lot of, in my discipline, in agricultural economics, I think a lot of the articles in our top journals are focused on methods, and so they're often using older data. They're often kind of backwards looking. I would love to see more research in agricultural economics like regional science that's more forward-looking. So let me share a couple examples of what we're doing at University of Illinois to make both valuable for promotion and tenure of faculty members. And throughout the conference, I'd love to hear from you what's working at your universities. I know this PIRO, Public Engagement Research Option, the University of Illinois and the University of Michigan, I think, are the two universities in the US that are using it. It came from Oxford University, so UK's ahead of us. But it's called Public Engagement Research Option, and it allows a faculty member to kind of trade some of the journal article or basic science that they should be doing for publicly engaged research. So it's saying, we know engineers, we know that getting out into rural areas of America and piloting this project is going to be a lot more work than just sitting at your desk and coding. And so at University of Illinois, last year, we started this program, and faculty will be able to be promoted and tenured in part by having this publicly engaged research if they choose. Another thing we just started is team science statements. In economics, we tend to have a lot of sole-authored articles. With the team science statements, we're basically saying to faculty, let your colleagues, your co-authors, write letters that can be part of your promotion and tenure documents that say, what is your importance to this work? What was your role in this work? And of course, I've already talked about our National Science Foundation requires broader impacts for all work, including basic science. So external funders are saying, we're not going to give you funding unless you have the impact from your research. So very interesting. Would love to talk with some of you at the break about that. So a few examples. How do you engage? Get to know your stakeholders. Build trust with your stakeholders. Build a steady stream of communication. If you can get help from communications folks to translate your work and communicate that work in a timely fashion, that will help with the engagement and the trust. These are just some examples of one-pagers that I've done based on journal articles, right? So distilling down a journal article and kind of making a one-pager that can help a policymaker or a business owner. Collaboration, let me move to collaboration. Again, I've talked about there has to be engagement, and then there has to be trust, and then, only then, can we have collaboration. So that's the engaging and opening the doors. Who's familiar with participatory research methods? Yeah, a few of us. I think that this is a really great way for academics to involve engagement and collaboration in their work. Participatory research basically uses the participants to help make the research better. So in the broadband story example, that would be participatory research where the community did a pre-survey, they did a during survey, they did a post-survey, but they helped us understand the data, they helped us put a face on the data, they helped us improve the data quality by getting out and knocking on people's doors and saying, we need you to fill that out. So if you're not familiar with participatory research, come chat with me this week or look it up. It's a really fun method. So the best practices for collaborating, I think participatory research is a really good one that some of us should think about. But it's getting involved, it's working with professional communicators, translating our research, and getting our boots on the ground. Tying this back to rural America, to our three themes of agronomy, demographics, and the economy, what can we do? So these maps are work that an assistant professor in my department did, and he's trying to predict the changes from precipitation and temperature globally to help farmers better understand what's going to happen as the climate warms. This is Dr. Krista Court. She's executive director of the Southern Regional Science Association in the U.S. She does economic impacts of hurricanes at University of Florida. She started with engagement. There'd be a hurricane, they'd send her data, she'd crank out an economic impact. But then there was a hurricane close to her home. She went out, she got boots on the ground, and she realized that the data she was being sent missed a lot of the impact. And so she was able to change the data gathering mechanisms by that collaboration piece, by getting her water boots on and waders and helping people clean out and talking to people. She realized, ooh, I'm leaving a lot of impact on the floor. And that led her to work with the state legislature to help bring more resources to farmers in Florida who'd been hurt by the hurricane. Dr. Mallory Ray is in the back there. This is an example of demographic change. Her collaborators said to her during the pandemic, hey, there's a lot of migration. People are leaving central cities. We've established that in a previous slide. How can we get them to come to our rural community? So she collaborated with the community. The community provided funding from the foundation. The community helped put together the survey instrument. And most importantly, the community went out knocking on doors, getting people to fill out the survey so she could do her analysis. And this is really collaborative. The community used the data from the survey to do programming that was really beneficial for the community. Mallory got a journal article, an RSPP article out of that. So that's a collaborative. Everybody wins. Here's something about mortality. Dr. Mark White. In the US, we have a very unusual situation in that in rural areas, prime age mortality, natural cause mortality, is increasing a lot. What does this mean? This means that if we're excluding suicides, drug overdoses, car accidents, so basically we're talking about heart, cardiovascular, cancer, people aged 25 to 54 are dying at increasing rates over the last 20 years, while people in urban areas of the US, their mortality is decreasing. Dr. Mark White got boots on the ground, got talking to people, was engaged with them to try and understand what the problem was so that we could tailor research to better solve those problems. And so this is just a map of a hotspot analysis, a LISA analysis, and you can see that the red areas are the counties where the mortality was extremely high. And then not too far away is an area where the mortality is low. And so he was able to use case studies of both regions to kind of help address that. And of course, there's some more positive things coming out of this. This is an example of a grocery store that was built in a rural community in Illinois, and it's owned by the community. It's cooperatively owned, which to Europeans is quite common, but in the US, co-op grocery stores are uncommon. And it was a community-owned and run grocery store because this community hadn't had a grocery store for 10 years. The nearest grocery store was 45 minutes away. So that's how some of this collaboration and engagement as part of a land-grant university, which University of Illinois is, can really benefit people. So, in conclusion, I think there's a lot of uncertainty around climate change. Some days it's going to be hotter, like this week. Some days it's going to be colder. Some days it's going to be drier. Some days it's going to be wetter. There's a lot of uncertainty. But I think that all of us, by engaging stakeholders, by communicating out the findings of our research, by working with communication professionals, can improve lives. And then we can collaborate with the communities that we're serving with climate-smart solutions. Think about your area of expertise. I sit on, in Columbia, Missouri, sat on the Broadband Community Task Force. So I helped the mayor develop broadband policy for the community. That was something that I had a lot of technical expertise as an academic, but I'm just doing it as a volunteer to help my community and help my community have broadband. Many of us have skills, whether we think it or not, that our communities, that our states, our regions could really benefit from, our policymakers could benefit from. So, in close, this is my last slide. I want to give you all an assignment this week. First of all, there have been many examples that I've said, ooh, come talk to me at the coffee break if you have an idea. Do come talk to me. But I want you all to network with each other and get to know each other. What did you say, Andrea? 41 countries? We have people? Yeah, people from 41 different countries. That is so cool. So let's get to know each other. Let's not just talk to people from our country or our supranational organization. And I challenge you all to discuss research questions and societal problems and think about ways that we can collaborate with each other as scientists, first of all, to conduct research that will help. Then, as scientists, once we're sitting around the table, we could think about how engaging with the local community like Kecskemét can improve our research by helping us ask more timely research questions, better informed research questions. I also challenge you all to get outdoors more. As Raj Chetty said, we don't get our best research ideas sitting at our desk, so go out on the town tomorrow night, get outdoors, and use your eyes and ears to understand how the world is changing around us and how we as regional scientists can really help our world become more resilient to a lot of these global challenges. Thank you. Any questions? So I've got 5 minutes for questions. Are there any brave souls who want to ask a question? Oh, there's a discussant. Oh, I'm sorry. Hans, please discuss my paper. Sorry, Hans. I'm fired now.
Well, no problem. Well, I have the privilege of being the discussant on Sarah's presentation. And I must say, I really liked your presentation. It's someone who talks about engagement and so on. It doesn't happen very often when we have our keynote speeches. But I think most of us, we got into this regional science because we have some engagement, or at least we started with some engagement for regional development. Then many of us, we dig so deep into our topics and we get more engaged in the academic career than in the real world. But it is also a possibility to step a little aside and look at the real world and the solutions for the real world. Again, I want to just one question to start with before I forget it. You mentioned that half of the US cities are depopulating, but is that also the case for the metropolitan regions as a whole, or is it just the core cities? Because we have this extreme example of Detroit City that during the last 50, 60 years have lost almost 3/4 of its population. But the Detroit metropolitan region have increased its population. But how is it?
Yes, definitely the core cities are depopulating. We do have some metros that are depopulating, particularly in the north part of the US where there used to be a lot of manufacturing. So the whole economy is based on manufacturing. And so there are large swaths of whole metro areas that are depopulating, which is really alarming. But of course, the core city depopulation is pretty big right now, particularly post-COVID.
Okay, good. Then I know that. Most often when we talk about the climate change and these issues, it's easy to get depressed because we know that global warming needs global solutions. And the global solutions so far are not really there, even if in some countries we are pretty good in decreasing the CO2 emissions, other countries are not. So that, from this perspective, I think it's also very, very nice to hear one saying, we can do something. As regional scientists, we have the knowledge. We can do something at the local level, also at the regional level, which is inspiring for us all, I must say. Then you were into a very important issue about publishing in high-ranked journals or writing a report for local or regional or even national government. Well, what is valued most? Yeah, we saw here already when Sarah asked that from the university perspective, it's no doubt that the publishing in high-ranked journals is worth so much more. And even if there are universities, say technical universities, agricultural universities, we who are active at those kind of universities, we are closer to the praxis, to the local level and what's happening. But the last 2 generations, I would say, we have had in many countries a kind of academization also at these universities. So my own university, what do we hear from those above? It is, you should publish in journals that are ranked in the Web of Science. Other reports are, in principle, worthless. At the same time, as we also hear some attempts that, oh yeah, we must focus more on the impact, the societal impact. But then the day after, this is forgotten. So it might sound a bit easy when you tell us how this should be work and so on. We must understand that here is also quite, the system resists a bit of this development that we think that Sarah is saying this we should do, and I really agree with her. But the opponents to this system are very, very strongly there, and we have it. We are also brought up with this. The more we are into the university, the more we accept these things that there is international rankings when it comes to publication and research and so on, but there are no international rankings when it comes to impact and collaboration and engagement. Yeah, I think that was the most important I wanted to say, and as I said, I really like this this approach that you have, and with persistence and good examples, I think we can contribute more. Great, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Hans.
Thank you, Professor Lowe. And for our next and last in this opening plenary session, please welcome Professor Balázs Lengyel.
Welcome, everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you so much. My name is Balázs Lengyel. I'm a senior research fellow at the Center for Economic and Regional Studies at the Hungarian Research Network, and an associate professor at the Corvinus University. And being born and raised in this region, in this country, well, in the southeast or the south from here, I feel I'm very happy and also very honored to be included in this conference so that I can speak about my favorite topic, which is networks. So we live in a small world, which is not just a saying when two random individuals meet and they find that they share friends. Okay? We actually live in networks which is very small. So consider 2 random individuals in these Facebook networks that live in Brazil and in Indonesia. So the expected number of steps we have to take in the Facebook networks actually 10 years ago is 4, to get from a random individual in Brazil to get to a random individual in Indonesia. Okay, so our network is very small. And what does it mean? It means that viruses and information travel very quick over the globe. Okay, so we learned it from the pandemic that we had to face. But we know it also from recent innovations. So like think about ChatGPT, which has been introduced less than 1.5 years ago, and now hundreds of millions of people use that. So diffusion is really quick. However, we also see that inequalities are growing. And we do not have to compare regions to understand that inequalities are growing across regions. We also see that inequalities are growing within cities, within close proximity with one another. So one question comes very burning. Why is that? Why is that happening? Why do inequalities grow in a world in which diffusion should be very quick, right? So let me spoil a little bit the talk with this slide and saying that even in small world networks, individuals tend to group with others who are similar to them, okay? And then prosperity is one of the most important dimensions in grouping individuals. Rich tend to friend with rich, the poor tend to group with poor. And then segregated networks form in which the diffusion of ideas, the diffusion of innovation, the diffusion of knowledge is not easy from one group to the other group. So let me start the story, being a Hungarian, start with some proudness and tell you guys that networks has very strong roots in this country. So here I put 2 papers that are like really the foundations of network science. The first one was written by Pál Erdős and Alfred Rényi, published in the Mathematics Journal of University of Debrecen, which is east from here, and became the cornerstone of graph theory. In this paper, they established the mathematical ground for dealing with networks. The other paper is a complete pioneer in popularizing networks and network science. And in this paper that was done in the late 90s in science by Albert László Barabási and Réka Albert is describing networks that usually are observable out in nature, in which the network has a very hierarchical structure, such that few nodes are very important in networks, and a lot of nodes are not that important in networks. But interesting enough, we should go back more in time to find the person who said and described the idea that the world is small for the first time, and this guy is Frigyes Karinti. Frigyes Karinti was a Hungarian novelist, very famous for satirical novels and satirical pieces, and in 1929 he published his short piece called Chains, Láncszemek in Hungarian, in which he described the idea that you should take only very few steps in the global network to go from yourself and to reach anyone in the network. Okay, so he was the first who came up with this idea almost 100 years ago. Later, it took a large-scale experiment for Stanley Milgram, world-famous social psychologist, to prove this idea. So to prove that, he asked 100 random individuals in the Midwest of the US to send a mail to a particular person in Massachusetts, if they know the person. If not, Milgram asked them to send the person, the closest person they know, and ask that person to forward the mail. So even though the networks, the social networks that we have tend to form cohesive groups that Milgram knew, he was wondering if it's possible to get to random individuals through a few steps. And he found yes. So he proved the idea of 6 degrees of separation, saying that it takes only very few steps to get from one random individual to another individual, even if our friendship networks are cohesive because we tend to know one another in social groups. It was later in the 90s, again, that the mathematical proof was published by Watts and Strogatz, who showed that it takes only very few bridges in such networks that makes the world small. Okay, so the steps needed, the network becomes small, even though we have very cohesive groups in these networks, only because of these few bridges that we have out there. And luckily enough, all these ideas, all these mathematical proofs, all these foundations were colliding with the traditional thought in sociology that dates back to the 70s already, that kind of describe the social system that we are located in with 2 types of connections. We tend to have cliques of friends, strong connections that provide trust and good learning environment from friends and close colleagues. But we also have bridges, or called weak ties, that provides us with the diversity that is out there. So if we have weak ties, then we have diverse access to knowledge or information. If we have strong ties, then we work and live in a group that has built trust and can work effectively and productively. So scholars in management sciences have proved the idea that we need both types of networks. We need cohesive networks, and we need diverse networks as well, such that we could combine diverse ideas into novelty and innovation. So coming back to regional science, what does this mean for us, the whole network story? It means that we live in social networks in which most of our links are with colleagues and friends who are co-located with us. That's what we see in the Facebook picture as well. However, few links that connect cities or countries or even continents make this network very small, such that we need very few steps to get from one point to the other. So knowing this, the question is how, and the question of my talk today is, how do small world networks induce innovation and inequalities? And I must say that this is an interdisciplinary question. So, like with the increase of available data that we can analyze today regarding mobility networks or individual mobility, collaboration in innovation or scientific knowledge generation, credit card transfers across companies, or input-output relationships on the company level, this type of question became interdisciplinary, in which scholars in related disciplines are also interested in the spatial and geographical aspect of that phenomenon. So let me just mention 2. One has been published in Nature very recently, and it's about saying that remote collaborations fuses fewer breakthroughs, right? So we need to come together and meet colleagues in order to generate ideas that that can generate breakthroughs. Another paper talking about Raj-Chetty is about inequalities. So in their paper that they did with Matthew Jackson, Teresa Kutchler, Johannes Strobel, and then a bunch of guys working at Facebook. They used and analyzed the entire Facebook data in the US and found that those poor guys who can manage, or like in their early years, over their childhood, can have a rich friend. So these poor guys will have much more opportunities later on because probably these rich friends can encourage them to go to school and then create opportunities later in life. So we have this interdisciplinary approach and growing community analyzing networks, and I would like to contribute to that with a network dynamics perspective. So in this plot, I summarize all the elements that we need for a general framework, and you don't have to memorize that. I will talk about this framework in the rest of the talk. But in this framework, we'll build on similarity and network closure, so that people tend to link to others who are similar to them, which generate these groups based on similarity. And the question is whether these groups can mix or remain segregated. And if we understand that dynamics, then we can talk about innovation and inequalities at the same time using the same framework. So let me start and continue with the paper that we published recently last year in Research Policy with Milad Abbasyarovte from the University of Groningen and Dieter Kogler from University College Dublin. And in this paper, we wanted to address a topic which is directly connected to the story I'm telling you today, but has been analyzed in the regional science literature already. So this topic is about collaboration networks and the impact of collaboration networks on innovation output on the regions. So we start from the paper that was published in Organization Science by Lee, Fleming and colleagues back in 2007, in which they analyzed small world networks and the impact of small world networks on innovation output. So what they found, so here you can see the collaboration network in Silicon Valley across innovators who are located in Silicon Valley, that this structure resembles a small world. Why? Because you see that most of the inventors tend to collaborate with others within the same company, but they also have collaborations across companies. And what Fleming and colleagues found, that these collaborations across companies makes the access to external information much more productive, which contributes to innovation in the region. What was missing from this empirical study was the role of knowledge. Because what we know is that the role of knowledge access has a critical importance in innovation, right? So there is a huge literature out there addressing this problem. So starting from the basics, like radical novelty needs diversity of knowledge, right? So if we want to produce innovation that is really new, then we need to have a diverse pool of knowledge in the city such that we can put together that and those elements into something that is really new. However, that diversity enough might not explain the whole story. Recently, more recently, scholars have also shown and argued that specialization can also facilitate innovation, because then a critical mass of knowledge is there in the region, and then you can build on that critical mass in the region to produce something new if you can connect these specializations of knowledge. One example for that connection is the Boston biotechnology example. Because in Boston, biotechnology had all the elements that needed to be combined technology was there, think about MIT, and biology was also pretty strong. So then, based on the co-location of these guys working in Boston, they could develop, and at least that's the theory says, they might be able to develop some connections which could help them to combine biology with technology, which is not that easy, I guess. I never tried, but there might be some constraints to do which social contacts could help. So let's go to the knowledge dynamics and I'm sorry, to the network dynamics, because there is also a very huge literature on network dynamics in regional science and related fields. So one of the central tenets is that, as I said before, similarity breeds connections. So inventors tend to collaborate with those inventors who have similar knowledge to them. So this is something that has been realized already in a series of studies, starting from Graber, Bosman, Franken, Giuliani, Balland, and others, have also shown this, and arguing that if that mechanism is at place, then we have a problem, because then regions tend to lock in into some specific technologies where their inventors are working at, and then these collaborations tend to reinforce that specialization, which might lead the region into a lock-in phase. Now also, a lot of people think about interregional connections. And another very popular idea is that if these guys, if these inventors can have collaborators outside of the region, then probably these interregional ties will induce novelty in their work, and then they can find new types of variations which can solve the lock-in problem of the region. So early theories, like 20 years ago, Bartelt and colleagues, a very famous paper on local buzz and global pipelines argues towards that direction. And Johannes Glückler in 2007 also showed established the theoretical framework that network dynamics not only shows towards lock-in, but there is also a potential for variation. And this is actually the topic of a paper that we did together with Sándor Juhász, who sits over there. He's a very smart guy. He's waving, so feel free to reach out to him. I will cite him many times over the talk. So he went out to printing and paper product industry companies here in Kecskemét and interviewed them about, like, if you have a problem, if you have a business problem, who do you contact? Which other companies do you contact? So he kind of collected an advice network in 1 year, and then he visited again these guys a few years later, I'm sorry. And what we found is that actually in such small networks as well, so like it's a network of 22 companies, in such a small network you can identify variation as well. So there is an effect of tri-disclosure, so you can get to a new company if you have a common friend, you share another company who you talk to. But if you know the same thing, so you are specialized in the same industry and the same product, then the likelihood that you will create new links to other companies is less, because then your knowledge that you might want to ask help in is overlapping with the other's knowledge, so you don't have to ask that guy. So business owners and entrepreneurs know this, and their motivation to establish new connections is based on that. They realize these self-interest-driven mechanisms in how they establish collaboration ties, and they are also trying to get local variation. So our problem in this empirical setting I'm presenting to you now was that how to disentangle the problem of impacts of knowledge on network dynamics, right? Like if you have the same knowledge, you are also likely to collaborate with others, but you don't want to probably, if you look for something else, then probably you need to find another person who is specialized in something else. So we had to find a tool that helps us disentangle this problem. And we found this tool in small world network research and in network science. So in network science, it's a very common tool to identify these hairballs of contact by a simple algorithm. And if we can, which is called community detection, I won't go to the details of that technique, but you can do it easily if you code. And then if you identify these hairballs of connections, then you can measure the technological profile of these connections, okay? And then the idea is that, by definition, these hairballs will be the strong cliques, and the links that bridge them will be the bridging links and the weak ties. Okay, so we applied this technique in this paper in which we used patent data that is very commonly used. We used the data that we collected from the European Patent Office, which contains information on investors, locations of inventors, and the technological profile of the patent itself. So then we were trying to explain the share of atypical patenting in European regions. So atypical patents is another, like identifying atypical patents is another technique that has been done in the science of science literature. We use the metric developed by Uzi and his colleagues. And atypicality in this sense means that in their paper meant that the scientific paper that they looked at combined knowledge that have rarely been combined before. So we apply the same technique for patents, and we measure whether the technological class, the IPC technology class, is combined in the paper. Then we measure how often those two technological classes have been combined in other patents before. So this gives us a measure on the patent level, which then we aggregate on the regional level, and then at the end we estimate the growth of the share of atypical patents in regions. The reason why we estimate the share is that it has been shown previously that atypical patents tend to concentrate in large cities, and therefore we wanted to find a measure that is somewhat free of scale. Okay, so then, without going into the details of how we measure the small worldness of the collaboration network, we use techniques that have been established before us. So we establish a collaboration network of inventors if they co-authored a patent in the past. So that will give us a collaboration network of inventors in which we can measure how small the network is, that we measure with the average steps we have to take when we get from one random inventor to another random inventor, and also measure how many triangles are formed in the network. And these measures are compared to null models that are suggested in the literature. So we have a small worldness indicator, and then we also came up with our ideas. And in these ideas, we use the technique I mentioned before. We identify the groups of inventors by this network science algorithm called community detection, and then measure, and then we look at the technological portfolio of these communities. And if we have that, and of course we do, then we can measure how specialized these communities are in a certain technology. So they might be specialized in computing, or they might be specialized in mechanical engineering and then in brain science and in other technologies, so their specialization might be low. So that's one thing that we measure. The other thing we measure is the number of, or the share of ties that link these communities in the co-inventor network. And then finally, we can also measure how similar these groups are in terms of technologies that they produce. So all these measures will help us understand how the combination of knowledge between two specialized groups can contribute to atypical knowledge generation. So what we find is that small wordness matter, so the smaller the network is, the better, because probably access to diversity matters for knowledge generation, but we also find that specialization matters. So the more specialized these communities are in our network, the higher share of atypical patterns, because probably they have the critical mass of that knowledge to combine with other types of knowledge. We also find that the share of inter-community ties help a lot, because these connections across specialized units establish the channel the channel for knowledge flow, which can help the combination of different knowledge, which is also there. So if these communities have similar technological profiles, then the share of atypical patterns is lower, because probably there is less availability of different knowledge across these units. So let me conclude this story with another example of that text, but a similar story. So think about tribes in West Kalimantan, an Indonesian island, in which you see two villages who are separated from one another by some distance, but they come together to share ideas. So these several villages come together to the market and exchange ideas about plants that can be used for drugs. So they share ideas, learn from one another, they go back home and learn in practice how those plants work. So they get specialized in learning about the combination of those drugs. They learn how it works, and once they go back to the market, they share knowledge with the others. They already know what works and what not works, so they can talk about different combinations. So I think like network dynamics works that way in innovation. We have this pulsation of networks in which we meet others in our cities or online, share ideas, and then go back home and practice those ideas and see whether these ideas work or not. And then come together again and share what we've learned. So what is missing, I think, and network science could help us to understand how this sharing is actually working. And here we have models on network diffusion that we can use and import from network science to understand the following questions. Who are those guys who can help us to distribute ideas that we import from others? Do we need inter-community links to distribute what type of knowledge in other networks? How do specialization and relatedness matters in those regions? And what is the role of organizations, and very importantly, the role of multinational companies, or those companies who have locations all over the place? We have, I think this area is very, we have a very limited understanding in that area. We have a paper that dealt with the diffusion of a very specific product in networks using these network science techniques. And if you are interested in that topic, feel free to reach out to me during the Congress. But now I would like to turn to inequalities, because I think that's a very pressing problem recently, and we need to I would like to convince you that we have very similar network dynamics there, and that problem is pressing. So here I will start from a paper that we published in Nature Communications 2 years ago, and in this one, the theory behind is that these very natural mechanisms of tide formation, which is similarity and triangle formation, will bring us to communities in which the rich and the poor are segregated. And if that's true, and access to information, diffusion, collaboration, all that network stuff matters, then this will lead to unequal economic progress, because if you have opportunity in one part of the network, that's difficult to spill over to the other part of the network. So this idea has been around in sociology for decades, and here we used a Hungarian online social network, which I'm sure that the Hungarians know, to get closer to understanding of the problem. This network is called IVIV, International Who is Who, and you should think about a Facebook type of social media website in which users linked with, documented their online their friends online. We have access to 2.8 million users who are like 1/3 of the total population, and more than 60–70% of the population who were on internet in the 2000s. So with colleagues, Ákos Jakubi, whom I don't see in the crowd, and with others, we analyzed the geography of that social network and found that geographical barriers matter a lot. So here you see the Lake Balaton, the biggest lake in the country, and what you see is that on the northern side of the lake, people tend to know each other across villages, but they don't know the others who live on the southern side of the lake. We also see that administrative barriers matter. So when we identify the communities in this network, we find that these communities, so the dense networks, tend to collide with the barriers of counties. In some exceptions, like here in the center of the country around Budapest, the communities collide with the river, the Danube. So geographical barriers and administrative barriers matter and segregate us, of course. But let's look at how these social networks correlate with inequalities. So we focused on cities and measured how much these social networks are fragmented in these given cities, and found, so here, for example, here you see two middle-sized towns, Gödöllő and Ajka, population around 30,000, and what you see is that Gödöllő has a fragmented social network, so here you can identify many groups that are loosely connected, but Ajka, which is an industrial town, has a more cohesive network with some groups as well there, but there are links across groups. So we find that this type of structure, so how we measure fragmentation of the network, correlates significantly with the Gini index of the income distribution in those towns in 2011, when we just collect towns that have more than a certain size of population. More interestingly, if we want to estimate the dynamics of income inequality over 5 years, starting from 2011, and the impact of network fragmentation on the dynamics, we find that income inequalities grow in those towns that have high initial inequalities and also highly fragmented networks, which tells us basically that the theoretical idea that comes from sociology might work actually, because if we see that fragmented networks are also paired with high inequalities, then probably these inequalities are across the different network fragments that we see, such that the poor is segregated from the rich in social networks, and then inequalities are growing. So why are social networks fragmented in towns? We think that the topology of the town matters. So then with colleagues who participated in this paper, we measured the topological fragmentation of these towns and quantified how much the living spaces in urban environments, how their fragmentation contributes to the fragmentation of social networks. So when we compare Kaposvár and Veszprém, so two university towns with a similar size, we see that Kaposvár is fragmented by a major road or two major roads, by a river, by rails. It's a very fragmented spatial structure. On the contrary, you see that Veszprém has a more, so it's much less fragmented. So people, and even people with children and strollers, can go and meet others. They don't have to get over the spatial barrier they face. So we find that actually that in towns where the urban topology is more fragmented, social networks tend to be more fragmented. On the contrary, in towns where the spatial, the geography is less fragmented, then social networks are more cohesive. We also look at the amenity distribution. So amenity distribution also matters because probably people not just meet at their home, but they also meet somewhere in the city. So what we see that in those areas, in those towns, where amenities concentrate in the city center, we tend to find more fragmented social networks because probably individuals living on the periphery of the city do not have access to the social life, so they are excluded from the face-to-face interactions that happens in the city. Going through a little bit of the papers that are following up these ideas, we looked with Sándor, we looked at Twitter networks in US metropolitan areas, because in Twitter you can identify also the home location of users who post enough tweets during the day, and you can also see who they follow and who they retweet. So then you can not just identify the home location of the user that you look at, but you can also identify the home location of the friends. So what we did, we checked whether poor individuals have different social networks from rich individuals in US cities. And we found that actually poor individuals who have income less than the median of the city tend to have more concentrated social networks in the same city than rich individuals who can reach out more easily and friend with others across the entire city. But of course, people not just stay at home, they commute and meet others, so probably commuting to work can help the poor guys who have very concentrated social networks in geographical space. And we find actually that in almost all the 50 largest US metropolitan areas, those individuals who tend to commute far from their home have more diverse network, including much more diversity in the network structure, and also including differences in terms of income levels, such that the poor can meet with the rich, and then the rich can meet with the poor. Finally, there are papers that we work on, and I think it's important to incorporate work on urban mobility, in which data, individual data, of course in a very safe manner, can help us understand how individuals in certain cities mix and where they mix, and how urban barriers hinder their meeting. So here I show you two examples in which we analyze Budapest and find that locations, the amenity distribution, amenity portfolio of locations matter for how much they can help this type of social mixing in the city. But barriers are also still very important, because these urban barriers makes it very difficult to get over and meet others that are not like us. So, closing with this famous US comedy, Meeting Places, in which the poor Eddie Murphy bumps into the rich Dan Aykroyd randomly, which triggers a series of events and then kind of leads to a situation when Eddie and Dan have to collaborate and learn about each other. This is pressed on them, and it's of course not without conflicts, but it's a type of story that kind of illustrates that probably the rich and the poor can be mixed, which can give us some outcomes. At the end of the movie, Eddie and Dan comes to the stock market and hits it, finds the American dream. So we have some dreams to reach, but whether the meeting of the rich and the poor in the city can really lead us to meaningful connections that can have impact on individual lives is still a matter of further research. So with that, I would like to thank you and have a look on our website and these really talented young researchers who work with us in Budapest. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Balázs, for this super rich presentation, super interesting, and thank you for involving me as discussant, but you assigned me a very complex task because Balázs and I have very similar research interests, so this makes the task more difficult for me. So I have a set of questions which are very much related. Let me start with the first block of results you presented us today, referring to the analysis on knowledge networks. And I liked a lot the fact that you are moving from the individual level to the team level. I use the term team, which is not very, let's say, appropriate. It's not the formal one, but this is the intuition behind it. You look at communities, which in a less formal jargon are teams of people. And I think this is truly the appropriate level of analysis. And I think this is a very important message for everyone working on this topic. Even if it's from the innovation policy perspective, is an extremely difficult target to tackle. So we have to keep in mind also that. But my question on this point refers to the fact that you propose us the ideal type of small network, of small world networks as the best approach. This is the one that fuels knowledge circulation, and then innovation follows, especially breakthrough, the most creative part of innovation. But my comment here is, if I got right from the slides, is how much these properties of regional networks should combine with the positioning of each region in global networks. I think this would, I'm extremely curious about this. I'm extremely curious how this idea of small networks within regions or cities, in many cases, actually combine with the idea of small networks at a supra-regional level. And I think here is, this was my first reflection after your slides. And second is more on the implications, normative policy implications that come out of these results. If small world networks are the ideal type, the target we should have in mind, how can we reconcile this approach with the intuition of place-based approaches, targeted approaches to regional development, and in particular innovation policies? I'm thinking about European smart specialization strategies and how these should be adapted in terms of entrepreneurial discovery and all these consequences.
And coming in the, I skip the technical part for the for our coffee break, but coming instead to the second block of results. Here I have a reflection which is very similar to the first one I made about innovation networks. How much this idea of fragmentation can be within cities, can be complemented in terms of fragmentation with respect to other cities. I'm thinking the intuition I had in mind was something like a borrowed size intuition all along, so in the sense that how much inequalities can be suffered if I live in a context which is fragmented but is also peripheral, fragmented in terms of accessibility to other places. And I'm thinking here about a series of papers in which the idea of accessibility and borrowed size services and amenities from cities of higher rank can help reducing the negative perception of inequalities. And these are my thoughts after your amazing presentation.
Thank you so
Thanks
much,
a lot.
Camilla. So I'm not sure if...
Should I go? Should I stay? Should I go back?
So do I have time to respond? Yeah, oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Camilla. It's three very interesting questions. So let me start with the first, and I think like so the first approach to address your problem, your question is like, how shall we incorporate interregional ties into this small world network research that we focused on, tried to focus on within region boundaries? And I think this is a very, very important question, which we wanted to explore later, but of course I would be would be very happy to collaborate on such ideas, because I think indeed, so like what I expect from interregional ties is that they induce diversity a lot. So then the question becomes, if those guys who are active interregionally or internationally, how can they combine resources? I think that's a very important question. In terms of the policy issues that you mentioned, so this research policy paper, it tries to kind of pioneer the problem that we have to measure technologies in the networks, and that's a problem, as you also said, like if you measure it on an individual level, on organization level, firm level. So we opted for these network communities, which is a decision. But the idea we wanted to sell is that probably it's not just specializations in the regions that matter, but we have to concentrate on how we can link them, and hope we can learn from this exercise and do more research to better understand what policy should do. But policy is also, and I completely agree with you, like in the urban context, so how social networks are fragmented in cities is a thing that urban policy should really have in mind. So most recent proximity-based developments in urban environments that aim to reduce car air pollution by establishing centers of amenities across the city, which is called the 15-minute city concept, has the danger that if individuals move and not move just around their neighborhoods and not mix in the city, then society will be more segregated in urban environments. So this is also a question we would like to understand better in a research proposal that we write now. Thank you so much for the comments.
Thank you so much. Dear participants, this concludes the opening ceremony and the first plenary session of the 2024 World Congress of the RSAI. After a coffee break shortly, we will continue with the first policy session and parallel sessions. Please use all available locations to get your coffee and refreshments in order to avoid longer queues. After the break, We ask all panelists of the OECD policy session to return here to the stage on time, and we kindly ask all chairs of the parallel sessions to start their sessions also on time. After the sessions, the welcome reception with a nice dinner and a drink tasting opportunity will start at 6 o'clock in the aula. Do not hesitate to contact our staff if you experience any problems or need assistance. Please refer to the program document of the event. On the back of the badge you are wearing, there is a QR code which if you scan with your mobile phone, you get to the website of our event, and you can find the program of the days and the map of the building and the city, together with our organizing and supporting parties, who you can see behind me on the screen and who we would like to thank for their help. Let me remind you that we will have a special information presentation on working opportunities in the European institutions, starting tomorrow at 6 o'clock in the evening in the ground floor, Kopácsi Sándor room, just next to the stairs. We kindly invite all of you to participate at this special program of the Congress. Now, thank you for your attention and enjoy the break and the rest of the programs today.